just how accurate we are, but we should know. We should get some hints early in this month, in the sense of around the 22nd, we should see the confirmation that our current pattern in the economy, or rather in the markets, is broken, and that's this pattern of everything being propped up since about July 15th. And then we should head back into a much more realistic appraisal of what's going on. But then again, we still have, like I say, all the confusion around the election, which isn't going to do the markets any good. And some of the economic stuff should be set up, I guess, by the 27th. So we may have a situation from where the 27th through the 7th of October, we have a very stressful time relative to the markets, in the sense of a lot of verbiage around the potential for a pending super crash.
Mm-hmm.
And then something pops as well, and it's, there it is, and everybody starts discussing it with some seriousness as it begins to manifest and holds us for the next 5 months. We can be wrong. I mean, no question about that. Usually on something like this, though, something this large, it's awful hard to be wrong in the main, in the individual particulars. When it starts, this kind of thing, we could definitely be wrong.
This again is I guess we could call it precognitive. As simple a term as that is, but it's the universal mind, the collective unconscious, the superconscious mind of living energy, whatever. And it's just remarkable to think about this and the past successes that they have had. For nothing to happen, and I'm not saying that it's going to be anything we recognize now. We even could guess. We don't know. But there's just too much energy all focused. And we haven't been being led or propagandized or programmed October surprise, any more than usual.
No, that's actually relatively low, I think.
I think you're right. So this is being read at a different level by the collective unconscious and being reflected in the language on the net. And the language, again, that you've picked is literally October 7th, correct? I mean, that's correct. That's correct. The phrase.
Correct. And it's interesting because we not only have it as a stated day. So let me explain some terms. If we have an emotion, we might label that emotion as fear. But when we have that same emotion that is is written out, we call that bespoke, in the sense that person bespoke the word fear, and it's not merely our interpretation. And we're getting this as a bespoke word in the sense that it would appear that in the future there will be words within the global media stream, articles written which reference October 7th, the same way we do with, for instance, the 7/7 bombing in London. I'm not saying a terrorist attack or anything, mind you. I'm merely stating how we memorialize or convert to an archetype the specific days. So we do believe that everybody will recognize at some point that it was October 7th that this all began. Now, it could be that we're looking at something, because we've had the language for a lockdown and this kind of a deal, we could be looking at something like a central bank lockup that would maybe start to manifest on the 27th. Everybody holds their breath to see what's going to happen to the global financial system, and then fluey on October 7th, it all lets loose. That kind of a deal.
And not necessarily, a lot of people think political and potential assassination. Right. That's a logical thing, and there is an overlay there that works. But the financial indicators continue to suggest that we're maybe just at the end of the beginning of this thing, and it's just really going to pick up steam. And we're out of bullets here. You can't keep doing this, and it may be all over. Lehman Brothers is in trouble. The South Koreans, a big bank there, is going to buy a piece of them, I guess, to try to keep them on life support. I again, and I think we talked about this last time, I think it's really all over. I don't think there's any way to reconstitute, rehabilitate, or reformat this current game anymore.
It does appear that that's the case. We also have a lot of indications in our work that we're going to hit a period of the absolute collapse of, quote, consumer spending in the U.S., probably hitting us in mid to late November with such a vengeance that it's pretty much the death of the consumer-based society at that point, and that's when we begin to really get into transformation. information.
And that's all we are anymore, is a consumer-based society, and have been for years. We quit manufacturing 20 years ago, basically.
Yeah, that won't last very long, though, and you'll be surprised at how rapidly the manufacturing begins to come back.
This is interesting, and there has been some manufacturing returning already because of the escalating price of fuel to transport some goods from remote locations.
Yeah, it used to be cheap to ship atoms and electronics or electrons. Now it's only digits that go cheaply.
Well, good point. Hang on, back in a minute with Clif of halfpasthuman.com. Hi, back with Clif. What about this winter, Clif? I mean, we've already answered the question partially, but are there any other memes showing up about extremely cold temperatures due to fuel shortages or anything like that?
Yeah, we actually have had that since probably November, December of last year, that this winter would be exceptionally cold, and to the point where combination of the economics that are going to develop and everything would actually lead to some levels of rationing. As George points out, rationing can occur in two forms, either through government edict or through price, I guess not control, but being out of control.
Right.
And we're probably going to get that. We've had some strange language indicating that in probably the northeast of the country, we're going to get to the point where schools are closed due to issues providing heat.
No heating, yeah.
Yeah, and then, but also the reverse of that shows up later on in the data, indicating that these same schools would be reopened as shelters of last resort in some fairly nasty storms.
Oh, and the heat
of course,
would be...
I say we've just come through and have evidence now that we've just come through a whole month with no sunspot, which have been associated, of course, with modern minimum and some of the other mini ice ages.
Well, we know the global warming is a fraud, and the planet is actually in a very definite cooling mode. That's clear.
It's very curious because we're passing gradually through the center or equatorial plane of the torus that is the dual torus that forms the Milky Way galaxy. And it could be that the magnetism itself, the incredible amounts that we're going to be seeing, might even slow the sun down and cause this to continue for a while. You can imagine it as the sun being a large gyroscope. It actually, relative to the whole solar system, it has 98% of the mass. It does not have the vast majority of angular momentum, which, of course, lies with the outer gas giants, theoretic gas giants, and the planets of Neptune and Uranus and former planet of Pluto. But the point being that if we look at it as a gyroscope, electromagnetically driven, so to speak, and then squeeze it with a large magnetic field, one of the effects you find is that they will still maintain stability, but they'll slow down.
Well, that's the work of David Talbot and Walt Thornhill, of course, who've been pushing the electric universe for what, 15
years? Yeah.
15 years. The first time I had Dave was on at least 15 years ago. Yeah, and I think they're right on with it. I concur with what they say.
And to a certain extent, it's actually kind of good. Not for us in the immediacy. That is to say, our data shows we're going to have rationing, food supplies. In fact, even to a certain extent, we're now getting language suggesting food chain breakage in several different areas, including fisheries and some land-based things, such perhaps we won't have the grain harvest that are expected next year by some serious fractional reduction, say a third or a fifth, something like that. Well,
you know the bizarre thing about all that, Cliff, and you know this, is that America's largest export is agriculture. We're selling off our food that our people are going to need here. Is bizarre. It's crazy. It's like we have some kind of a death wish or something.
And food is a curious kind of a precursor as well, because in for instance, the last official exchange between Hitler's Third Reich and the Russians was the purchase of a trainload of grain. And then they cut off all kinds of contact with them and went to war. And just recently, of course, the Russians have decided, well, they're not going to accept U.S. of A. chickens anymore. No poultry products are allowed.
They also shut down their gas supplies to Germany and Poland. because of repairs. The message is quite clear. Is there anything in your data about World War III? With the Poland missiles and Caucasus War and attacks on Iran or whatever? Nothing, huh?
Not per se. We have the military running a little bit ragged, and we have military as a very large context that comes on up and maintains all the way through this release period. Mm-hmm. So we could be looking at the beginning of that, but if so, it would probably be akin to the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand in the 5 or 6 months that followed that prior to the actual outbreak of hostilities.
It didn't immediately trigger World War I, no.
Correct. But around here these days, of course, we don't have the luxury of slow communications to allow everybody to cool off. So in this case, we might see the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand, and then day by day by day by day, the visibility of the whole thing happens to the point where there is no cooling off. Now, at the end of this release period, which is the 19th of February, we get a very small period, I think, of some 21 days or so of building tension language with little tiny bits of release language in there, and then another slight drop in the release language again, and that sort of stair-step shark tooth pattern continues for about 4 or 5 months. But most of that is around a combination of Terra intrusions, maybe in the form of a global coastal event. Now, and that could be either too much water or maybe not enough water. There's rumors now coming out that in observational anecdotal evidence that we're getting new snow on top of old snow unmelted from last year in the Rockies and maybe even in the Cascades.
Huh.
If that starts then and continues, then it actually builds up the very base for what could become new glaciers. And that process can be quite rapid.
Right.
So it might be possible that we would see a significant reduction in global coastal high tide by even, say, a foot or so, or the reverse. We still have all of the cracking of the glaciers and so on in Greenland, and that's going to impact us next year. Just about the time we get into our food crisis in a serious way.
All right, looking